where are you right now with your project? What is the current state of affairs?
So the top line of the project is that it's a collaborative artificial embryo model that is parented by a collectively trained artificial intelligence. Artificial embryo models are a new area of science that a lot of people are very excited about. What you do is you take a group of stem cells, you put them together in a clever way, and they start to behave like they are an embryo. In our project, rather than all those stem cells coming from the same person, they'll be coming from quite a lot, potentially, of different people. So you have that question of, are they donors or are they parents?
How is it not an embryo and more an embryonic model?
So scientists make embryo models because they want to be able to do science and experiments that they cannot do on embryos. You want them to behave as much like an embryo as you can because you want to be able to see what an embryo does when it develops the beginnings of a heart or whatever it is you're looking at. But you want it to be as far away from being an actual embryo as it can be. And that's done in a lot of different ways. So the top line of that is that you design them so that they are non-viable. And that means so that they cannot become babies. The ones that we make are non-incorporated, so that means that they never grow a placenta. It's a bit like a reverse of Theseus's ship. And this is where I think all of these ethical debates are really located. In this question of, is there a kind of additional point where it magically becomes a human, but also in the question of whether it can ever be a human. We're going to put together a consortium, a group of stakeholders and parties whose opinions I think are interesting. So that will be a number of different community groups. It may or may not be the donors and parents. I think that's an interesting question, but also people like ethicists and lawmakers. And I'm asking them to train an AI to make ethical decisions on behalf of this artificial embryo model. When we train an AI, we have to give it the framework by which we want those decisions to be made. Those kind of decisions that are made like in ethics boards around the world at the moment are usually quite opaque in terms of the kind of structure underneath them. You often know the people who are making the decision, but you don't know whether they're saying, I don't know, I believe in Plato's form of ethics, or I believe in the greatest good for the greatest number, like whatever it might be. That is not normally something that is transparent, even potentially to the people who are making those decisions. But when we train an AI, we have to give it those frameworks, or certainly that's the way we're going to train the AI.
I think it's so interesting, this idea that you want to create a diverse and maybe disagreeing consortium that will have to create a framework or some kind of idea of what can we agree on should be the most important points in making decisions. Thereby, again, I mean, as a dreamer, confronting that this is a universal right. Culture, nature, and parenting are so intrinsically linked to class and access that that I see it more as whenever it's being negotiated or changed, it's a despite of. We'll do it anyways. We'll figure out a way.
Reproduction is never natural. Not now, anyway. It is always cultural. Who gets to reproduce? With whom do they get to reproduce? When do they get to reproduce? There isn't really a structure that you could name within human societies since forever that isn't affected by the way that we parent and also the way that we reproduce. I'm really interested in, first of all, revealing that, because I think it's something that is really underexplored, and particularly underexplored by traditional patriarchal philosophical systems. But secondly, I'm interested in how we might use that to bring about the futures that we want.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the importance of the collective or the collaborative donation model that you went for with the artificial embryo model. Can you expand a bit on how you got to the point of wanting multiple donors instead of just having one clone?
I want to imagine other forms of reproduction and futures which allow for collaborative and collective reproduction. And I hope that this project, by kind of proffering one way that might happen, will help us to do that.
I'm looking forward to seeing how the donors will feel about the artificial embryo model once they see it. And especially to see it where they can't put it on as theirs. Especially if the number of donors is so big that it's not to be known if it's actually their stem cells that are growing as an artificial embryo model. This idea of at what point can we feel connected to human tissue and when can we not? Multi-parent structures have to navigate ethical questions before even conceiving, where many parents will, if they're doing it the most common way, which is two people choosing in a hetero structure to have a child, they most often will not ask questions about when does something become human, what does that mean to us, until they hit some kind of issue. I kind of thinking that there's an aspect of belonging, and connection, that with the AI, we are giving it something from us, whereas maybe inherently there's this idea that it's been taken from us collectively, the tissue. Literally someone has given something of themselves in a form of matter with the embryo models, but then with the AI, we give them our thoughts or our reflections. And it's interesting how that belonging is emotionally more connected to the tissue.
You might talk about tissue, and then you might, at a later point, talk about something as valuable as an egg or an embryo or a fetus or a baby or a person or human. We have this kind of sliding scale of inferred value related to material that is human.
It is a mirror to your own emotional landscape and your own ethics. Someone will have a very late pregnancy loss and choose to disregard this as a child. That can have many reasons, whereas other people really want it to be acknowledged within the community, at least by themselves or their partners or their friends, that very, very early pregnancy loss, even under what we would call the abortion limit, fully is a child. I fear, though, for now, in our society, where this emotional response to losing, potentially losing, or for someone else to choose not to carry, brings up such emotions that they become political, and that it will force legislation that will limit body choice, free body choice.
One of the purposes of the project is really simply to open up discussion and debate around these nearly, not quite, maybe human entities, and to empower audiences in terms of how they think these entities should be governed.
A hidden aspect of this project is all of the limitations that are still linked to reproductive rights and reproduction in general for minorities, of how they cannot yet get access to it because we or the society or the ethical boards are still navigating what is human matter, when is human matter, who gets to control it, who gets to have access to it, and what will be the price.
We fear that we will accidentally create monsters, quite literally that we will create monsters. And more than that, we fear that we will, through our creation of these entities, become the monster ourselves. We fear that we will lose track of our ethics and morality to such a degree, I think, that we are going to become the Frankensteins.